Hello, everyone. I am, of course, Christine Gritman, and this is Let's Talk About Brand. I'm coming at you every single Friday at 12 noon Eastern Time on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So please let me know where you are watching from and if you're joining us live or on the replay. Though speaking of live, I do want to note that this program normally is live. This episode is pre-recorded, but we're doing it straight through as though it were live. We have already had the Chat About Brand Twitter chat this week, all about branding for millennials, so we'll be getting some of your ideas in here as usual. And feel free to post any questions, thoughts, anything like that in the comments. I'm here with you live in the comments now, actually, so I will be happy to read them and answer. And if you got any questions for our guest, feel free to pop them in there too. I did just mention my chat. The companion to this Let's Talk About Brand live stream show is the Chat About Brand Twitter chat. That is on Tuesdays, also at 12 noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. British Time. And we talk about the same topic as that Friday's show is going to be on. So this week we talked all about branding for millennials, and we attacked that from a few different angles. One of them, of course, was how do you brand in a way that appeals to millennials? What doesn't appeal to millennials? Because the fact is, not only have millennials always been a huge market since they popped on the scene, they've been a highly influential market, but they've also changed the rules of the game in a lot of different ways. And then we also talked about how millennials can brand themselves, and also how millennials have shaped the working world. There's just so much to dig into when it comes to millennials. We've only got half an hour here, so without any further ado, I am going to bring on the expert on millennial marketing and personal branding, the lovely Chelsea. Hello, Chelsea. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I meant to ask this before we came on, but Krost or Krost?
Krost. Like Frost with a K.
Nice. That's what I thought. Well, actually, normally we save the Twitter chat user questions till the end, but this one seems like a good one to start off with, which is, Wholesome Media wants to know, how did you figure out the millennials were interesting to you? And I know you are a millennial, but the fact is, how did you make this the focus of kind of a huge part of your personal brand is that you are a millennial expert?
I saw that question on Twitter and loved that question because it was, I don't know if I've ever been asked that question before, and been doing this for about 15 years. But the honest truth is, when I was 16 years old, which was back in 2007, I was craving bigger connection. I was really craving social media before social media. You know, at the time it was MySpace, and MySpace was a little bit of a scary territory, right? You know, like parents were still a little concerned about their children being on MySpace. And Facebook, you had to have a college EDU to have an account. So there was little access to a bigger connection. And I was in television production in high school, and I was so immediately in love with all aspects of communication and sharing stories and bringing more information to light. And that is what inspired me to do more. And I put together, long story short, a radio talk show concept called Teen Talk Live. And it was, if you're familiar with The View, ABC, the View that we all know, Whoopi Goldberg, Barbara Walters' View. I said, I want a view for me and my peers. Where's the conversation amongst millennials? Because at the time, it was also where millennials were lazy, narcissistic, entitled, the demise of the future. There was nothing positive being said about my peers, this generation. I was really frustrated by that. I was really frustrated that, you had all these baby boomers and Gen Xers talking so negatively about millennials, but there was no millennials voicing up, for ourselves, for our peers. So that was really the, catalyst, if you will, to focusing more on millennials. Connecting with millennials outside of, your community. Nationwide, international. Teen Talk Live did get picked up as a radio show. We were on air for over 3 years before we got syndicated. And so that was the initial interest in millennials, aside from, of course, being a millennial myself, and just want to advocate and enhance the voice of my peers.
Now, one thing that's interesting is that, as you said, originally it was about millennials for themselves, having a place to connect and talk within amongst yourselves. But of course, millennials, especially when you were a teenager, because that was when I first got started in marketing. So I was keenly aware of how hard all the companies were talking about millennials as a buzzword. It was a little bit crazy. So how did you move into talking about millennials beyond millennials themselves?
Yeah. So, my career when I think about my 16-year-old self and mission, I could have never expected, the journey that it would lead me on. So when I started Teen Talk Live, of course, it was for millennials, hosted by millennials, right? Little did I know, Christine, there was going to be just as many Gen Xers and baby boomers listening into the show, calling into the show, writing into the show, because there was this awareness that millennials were truly this different generation than we've ever seen because of technology, because of the times, and people were really interested in understanding the mindset of millennials and how to better connect with millennials as parents, as thought leaders, as teachers, as brands, as companies, right? So that's where the evolution of me just being a host and a producer turned into more of a consultant. When I was 18 years old, I got asked by You by Kotex to be the millennial spokesperson for 1 year and help build the You by Kotex brand from scratch, as well as help build their digital online and offline community. And they wanted to have a speaking tour across the US.
You were an influencer way before Instagram. I love that.
I was an influencer before the word influencer existed.
Yeah.
This is the truth, and this is going back to 2009. The word millennial was still kind of like, what is a millennial? Who is a millennial? And the word influencer was just not in our vocabulary. So 1 year working with You by Kotex turned actually into 5 years working together. So all that 5-year period, my master's in influencer marketing.
My goodness.
It was the boom of influencer marketing. And it was also the boom of, oh, wait, all of these people who had been creating a voice, a mission, a platform, a community on social media have influence. And they could have influence in purchasing decisions, buying behaviors, sales, ROI. And there was more and more of this energy and initiative to tap everyday people, right? Influencers, not celebrities like the Kim Kardashians of the world, to activate on behalf of their brand. So You by Kotex was another catalyst to my consulting piece of Chelsea Productions and working with brands, national and international over the past 15 years now.
I love that. Now, to your point, companies were figuring out that this was a very different market demographic and they needed to know how brands could get through to them. So clearly there was something different about how millennials were responding to brands. The old tricks weren't working. So what are some of those things that make millennials different as a market in terms of how they respond to brand messaging?
I still remember this moment, Christine, so vividly. I was standing on stage speaking at Sage Summit, which is a huge marketing convention. It happens all over the world. This was back in 2012, 2013. So still, social media was still in its infancy for sure, as were millennials. And I was on stage and the presentation was on marketing to millennials and how introducing people to influencers. What is an influencer? How to work with influencers? How to utilize social media to connect with this generation of consumers? What kind of content to create to connect with these consumers? And you heard a lot of in the audience. A lot of vocal, reaction.
Harumphing.
People were peeved that I was even there talking about this topic because it was like blasphemy to these people, right? And such a different thought, outside of marketing and advertising that we've ever seen up until, social media and millennials. And in the Q&A portion, someone stood up and said, well, don't you think that social media is just going to be a fad? Like, why do I need to spend time, money, energy on Facebook?
Okay,
And I was
boomer.
like, and I couldn't help it, Christine. I actually laughed at it.
Yep.
Like, I
Yep.
laughed at on stage. And as I started laughing, some people started clapping and some people started standing up and leaving.
Oh my
And
goodness.
it was this like very interesting dynamic in the audience. And then it actually started to attract other people to come. And there was standing room only because of this conflict,
That's so crazy.
so crazy. Like, I wish I had that moment on camera so
Yep.
much. And I'd love to know where that business owner is today as well.
Yep.
But I don't even know why I started this story, Christine. But what was the prompt one more time?
It was just about how brand marketing messages land differently with millennials. What they reject, what they embrace, how to get through differently.
I swear I still have mom brain. My son is almost 51, and I truly still brain fog.
I feel
and
you.
mom
My
brain
my
is
kids
a
are
weird-
my kids are 7 and 10, and I still claim mom brain. It's all good.
Okay, thank you for validating, because it's real. Yeah, so just the idea that, going back from 20, almost 10 years now, and how far we've come in the differentiation that millennial consumers have brought to advertising and marketing. Ultimately, if you want to market to millennials, you have to have a presence on social media. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, right? But here's the thing, Christine. The biggest mistake that I see when brands trying to market to this generation is that they encapsulate all of millennials into the same group, like this homogenous consumer group, like as if we all think and act and purchase the same. And that is so untrue. Millennial generation, we're 25 to 40 years old right now. The mindset,
Huge.
priorities, income are so different. Life stages, right? So different at 25, fresh out of college. You've only been drinking legally for 4 years, right? Different from the 40-year-old.
Absolutely,
So
completely different phases. Even 25 to 30 was
Even
dramatically different for me. Different life experiences that you graduate into. I graduated from college in 2002. So the class before me graduated into the burst of the dot-com bubble. So that was their defining moment. My class had 9/11 right at the beginning of senior year. Everyone's just kind of defined. My nephew is he's just a little younger than the millennials, so he's the beginning of Gen Z, so he probably has some millennial tendencies, and he is about to graduate having had, the pandemic going for almost all of his college experience. It shapes you in such different ways, including as a consumer and just behavior.
And to that exact point, Christine, anytime I'm doing a presentation of any sorts in regards to marketing to millennials, millennial mindset, consumer behavior, I start out with a slide that breaks down, 6 millennial micro markets, right? Within the 25 to 40-year-old age bracket, there are micro markets within the overall market of millennials that you need to define who your micro market is, and then specialize in your marketing and advertising strategy or in your content creation. But in addition to that, right after the millennial micro market breakdown, I have key events that have happened within our lifetime that have shaped the way we think, act, and purchase. And of course, 9/11 is definitely on that list. So we have to take all of these things into consideration when talking about how to shape our brand to appeal millennial. We have to, and when I say we, I am a millennial, but all generations, right? If you're a Gen Xer, if you're a boomer, and you're trying to appeal millennial, you need to step into the mindset of a millennial and understand, especially the micro market you're trying to, really capture. So for example, if you're 25, you're entry level in the workplace. You definitely are not buying your first home. You are maybe engaged. You probably don't have children, right? So what are the demographics for the micro market that speak to your product, your service, your brand mission? And that's where that's the core. That's the foundation that every company should know. Here are the target. Here's my micro market. Here are the demographics of within the micro market that I can hit on those points within my marketing messaging.
So, even though obviously your key point was, of course, that they aren't a monolith, if we do sort of zoom back, what are some fairly legitimate commonalities or even misperceptions, but any sort of commonalities that you can think of when a marketing deck boils down millennial? Like, what are some things that you think maybe they're thinking of? Yeah, and the validity also of those perceptions is also something I'd love your take on.
Yeah, well, some of the overarching, check marks, right, for the millennial generation when it comes to marketing, branding, appealing to millennial is one, understanding the millennial mindset as a whole. So there's a lot of research and information out there in regards to, the age range, right, 25 to 40 years old, and what happened in the world within us growing up. It was the infancy of social media. We immediately all got onto social media. We've been building our digital footprint and our online communities for over a decade now, right? So we can all resonate that way as a millennial generation. When it comes to millennials, also, we are a generation that will, I don't know if you can curse on this show. Can you, Christine?
Sure, you fucking can.
I was going to say, we will weed through the bullshit, right? So when it comes to your marketing and advertising messaging, is it authentic? Can we validate it? Do you have any sustainable components to your company mission? How are you bringing that to the forefront of your brand story? These are all things that millennial consumers really value and will seek out as well. There are tons of statistics out there that will tell you, right, if these are two products and they're the same product, and if this one has a sustainable component or it has a give back component, millennials are more likely to purchase this product. So a give back, social component, sustainable component, very of great value to millennials. We really appreciate transparency, and if you're not transparent with your ingredients, your products, your employee engagement, employee advocacy, we also are suspect of that as well.
Right? I love that, because that was actually one of the key themes that kept coming up in the chat the other day, which is, you can't bullshit us. Like, millennials need you to be real. The social engagement and the social cause component was big, but I love how you pointed out it goes to the point of ingredients. I hadn't even thought of that, but that's so true. Companies used to get away with not saying a thing, but millennials, I mean, they know so much more because, and they care.
You know what? When I think of the perfect example, right, for within this conversation, I always circle back to Jessica Alba and The Honest Company, because Jessica Alba's that, she's probably, I don't actually know her exact age, but I'm thinking she's a cusper, right?
Yeah, I'm a cusper too. I think she's probably like 79, 80, 81 in there.
Yeah, she's definitely a cusper, but she definitely thought millennial, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of cuspers, and there's a lot of even Gen Xers that will, go, I'm millennial minded, right? And what she did with The Honest Company was take all of these products, right, in regards to beauty and childcare that exist, but she made sure that they were holistic, safe ingredients that made parents and people more confident and feel, the trust within the ingredients, because that was so part of the brand story and the mission behind Honest Company, of wanting to purchase something that we felt was not doing our children harm, or our self-harm with beauty products. And that's also why, it's become a billion-dollar company. She was of the first to really tap into that mindset and value component within the next generation of consumers and hit it out of the park, right? And the other component to that, and Honest Company is another great example of this, is using peer approval to its advantage, right? Millennials are the peer approval generation, meaning we look to reviews and testimonials and online video, explainer videos of everyday people's reaction, response, or success rate to the product. And we judge that as a major indicator of, do we purchase or do we not? And Honest Company, and do this as an exercise, everyone. Go onto the Honest Company website and click on a product page and scroll down on the products page, and you will see review after review after review after customer stories. And I find myself reading more of the reviews and the stories than even scrolling through all the products, because I'm so motivated and excited by people's reaction to certain products. And, so reviews, testimonials, peer approval is essential and so valued amongst the millennial consumer. And also, if your service or product or brand or business does not have reviews or testimonials, we are suspect to lean in. So, you could be hurting yourself by not bringing those reviews to the forefront. That's how much we put weight on peer approval today as a generation.
And that's also part of transparency too, which is that you're being willing to show what people are actually saying about you. I think that's so huge. We could go on about this part forever, but I just want to make sure that before we wrap up that we get to also, we talked in the chat about how millennials have changed the culture of work. And, it was one thing when millennials were, just coming out of college and showing up differently than boomers expected. But now a lot of times millennials are the boss. As you said, most of them are in their 30s now. Millennials are starting to turn 40. So they are often kind of setting the tone for the workplace. And it's important. And two things I want to get into with this, somewhat briefly, I'm sorry, but on the one hand, what are some kind of advantages or disadvantages to people's impressions of millennials? So when you're coming into the workplace, what are some things you maybe want to emphasize or downplay or anything like that? But then also separately, if you're someone who's coming to work for a millennial, whether you're someone who's older or younger, just having that understanding of, as you put it, the millennial mindset, how does that apply to the workplace and to how maybe you want to show up, whether you are the millennial branding yourself in the workplace or whether you were trying to relate to a millennial boss?
Yeah, well, millennials are not only entry-level positions. When I started having this conversation 10 years ago, we were all the interns or, doing all the scut work and entry-level, and people were blown away that we were, riding our skateboards into the office and looking to, remote work more. But ultimately, a lot of the values that go into consumer behavior also apply to millennials in the workplace, right? We really value transparency. We really value open dialogue, right? So, that whole notion of, I'm sure it still happens, but I think less and less, back in the day, you had an annual review. And that doesn't work for millennials. We want more constant feedback, right? And some people think that this is goes to the trophy generation thing. But no, I think communication and feedback is what makes more productivity and engagement in the workplace. Do you know that there is such a high, and I wish I knew the stat off the top of my head, but it is over 50% of managers in the workforce today don't even know what they're supposed to be doing because they don't have open dialogue and communication with their higher.
That's insane.
It's crazy, right?
The lack of communication. I mean, I guess there was a lack of communication in previous generations because it's like you're a cog in the machine.
Yes.
Millennials are not a cog in anyone's machine.
100%. And I think we kind of had a little bit more of that militarian, you know, the boss was a little scary, right? Back in the day, the boss always had the big office behind closed doors. So it was like, you couldn't necessarily touch them unless they, poked you. And that just doesn't work for millennials in the workplace. We want to have, that's why, open floor plans and glass offices are, all the rage because of that transparency element. That's why the founder and CEOs of Google have roaming desks throughout all of the floors of Google, because they want to be a part of the community and the culture of their employees. The big thing that makes millennial employees want to work for your company and also stay at your company are a few things. Is there good rapport with your manager? That is essential, right? Do you have the opportunity to use technology to its utmost advantage? There were so many, companies and corporations within the past decade that didn't want to evolve with technology, which just made things less productive, more time consuming, and more frustrating amongst employees. We could use this app or this software tool to do it that much faster. So that's a big frustration amongst millennials in the workplace. And can't we use technology to its advantage to enhance our workplace, our productivity, our output, our creativity? 3 is, do you have remote work options? Of course, within the pandemic, we've been, that's kind of, it's become more of all of our norm. And there are tons of articles out there from big corporations and companies going, we cannot believe the level of productivity, and our employees aren't even in the workplace. I actually was just listening to a podcast the other day, Christine, and the average amount of time an employee within the workplace actually has consistent, productive workflow without breaking that flow. What would you guess the time duration would be?
Are we talking working from home, or are we talking in the office?
In the workplace.
In the workplace, 2.5 hours.
3 minutes.
Oh
3 minutes. And why is it 3 minutes?
I buy that.
When thinking in the workplace in particular, right, you have more access to someone popping into your office, popping out of your office, and all of the notifications that we're getting constantly and that we're bombarded by, that's breaking our concentration, right? So there are so many things working for us and working against us. And we have to be in charge of managing our own productivity and what works and what doesn't work for us, as employees, as business owners, as entrepreneurs. But if you are an employee and your manager does not have that element of leadership, right, that trickles down all the way from, manager to intern. So that's why the manager, who's running the show, is of the most make or break for millennials in the workplace. What makes them stay or what makes them leave. The other big thing, Christine, is up-leveling skill set. Are you a workplace that is constantly strengthening the skill sets of your employee pool to also help bridge the generation gap? Right? So if there's a new software tool that you're rolling out, within your processes and your system, that's probably going to be way more easy for a millennial or Gen Zer to pick up, right? Just because we are digital natives. But the Gen Xers or baby boomers, they might need a little assistance. So up-leveling skill sets, learning opportunities within the workplace, whether it's a speaker series or, even just online courses, right? Like my LinkedIn Learning courses, for example, are huge up-leveling skill set examples that companies or corporations, it's a mandatory thing that, employees have to take this course. By the end of the course, you also get a certificate of completion. you can add that skill set now to your resume, to your LinkedIn profile. So you're also building your, personal brand and also your employee strength. So those are some of the big overarching, things in the workplace that millennials and Gen Zers, which because they're the interns now, are all going to really demand.
And that's a good point, because your LinkedIn Learning course, which is like the highest ranked course 2 years running, is about personal branding, which is also something that previously employers didn't embrace as much. And that's I think another change too, which I certainly applaud as a branding person too.
Yes, and you know what that is connected to, Christine? Mm-hmm. The reason why employers, companies, corporations, large and small, are now interested in inspiring and empowering their employees to build their personal brands is because the more powerful your employee's personal brand presence is online, the more influence and brand awareness they're bringing back to the company. I say all smart business owners or managers that can look at their employees as internal influencers, that's the way to go. Because brand messaging shared from employees gets reshared and retweeted and is converted so much higher than actually the messaging from the brand itself. And that goes to peer approval.
There you go, and it all comes together. I love that. Oh my goodness, I could have like a half-day episode with you about this.
There's so many elements to millennials have just scratched the surface. I mean, Gen Zers are going to do so many additional things, right? And I'm so excited to kind of watch them evolve as a generation.
Yeah.
But millennials were the catalyst for change in the workplace, right? New way to work with millennials, and also new way to market and advertise and connect with consumers. And if you could think really narrowing down, okay, what is the mindset of my target demographic within millennial, you will be that much, more capable within your hiring efforts, retention rate in the workplace, and also, of course, marketing to the millennial consumer.
Beautiful. Chef's kiss. Love it. I'm so glad that you were able to join us this week, Chelsea. Thank you so much. Let everyone at home know where they can find you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I know this was like such a fast conversation, but thank you. Action-packed 30 minutes. Please feel free to connect with me on social media, all channels at Chelsea Krost. If you're a LinkedIn learner, if you have LinkedIn Premium, you have access to all my courses on LinkedIn for free, which is awesome. If you don't have LinkedIn Premium, all of my courses are available a la carte for very small, low price point, like within the $20, $25 range. So if you're interested in marketing to millennials, influencer marketing, personal branding, brand strategy and reputation management, or how to work smarter, not harder, especially if you are a solopreneur or small business owner, I got you covered on LinkedIn.
Love it. Fantastic. I'm going to check that out too, because clearly branding is an interest and I can always learn more, especially from other perspectives. Love it. Fantastic. Definitely going to check that out. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Christine. Thanks so much.
And thanks to all of you who are watching. As I mentioned, we are not live this week, but we normally are. Next week, we should be back at it. Again, I do this show every single Friday at 12 noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time, 5 p.m. British Time. But also make sure to mark your calendar for Tuesdays. Tuesdays, I have a Twitter chat called #ChatAboutBrand. Another thing that I want to make sure I always try to let you know about is that I am also the senior content editor for Social Media Pulse. If you haven't seen this guy, our little space friend, clearly you're not in Social Media Pulse, so make sure to go join us at socialmediapulse.community. I also totally forgot at the beginning of the show to thank the heck out of last week's guest, host. Last week I had COVID. It was my first rodeo with COVID. It was thankfully mild and short, but I really want to thank from the bottom of my heart my good friend Jeremy Lineberg for hopping in at the last minute. I want to thank last week's guests, Joe Cole and Dakota Snow, for being so flexible and so generous and showing up and just being game for anything, and for giving us kind of the reveal of their new venture. Lots of good ideas. So thanks so much for joining us. I hope that you will join us again next week. Again, let us know where you're watching, when you're watching, and see you soon.